A 26-year-old pilot. Captain collapsed. Cockpit burning. All instruments dead. 164 souls on board. He was seconds from crashing. Then a child's voice, "My grandma is call sign Angel. She says follow the river." The girl was 13. Last row, seat 32F. And every air traffic controller just went silent. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. It was a perfect evening for flying. The sky over Frankfurt was clear and calm. The temperature was a comfortable 18 degrees Celsius. Light winds. Visibility unlimited. The kind of evening that makes pilots smile because everything just works. Lufthansa Flight 437 was scheduled to depart at 6:47 p.m. Frankfurt to Athens. A routine Tuesday evening flight. 2.5 hours in the air. Nothing special. Just another day at work. The Airbus A320-214 sat at the gate, gleaming under the airport lights. Registration DZR. Only 3 years old. Fresh from scheduled maintenance 2 days ago. Every system had been tested. Every checklist completed. The mechanics had signed off on everything. Perfect condition. Inside the cockpit, Captain Hans Weber settled into his seat. At 58 years old, Weber had been flying for 42 years. He had logged 23,000 flight hours. He was a legend at Lufthansa. The captain everyone wanted to fly with. The mentor who had trained dozens of young first officers. The man who knew the Frankfurt-Athens route so well he could fly it in his sleep. Weber had flown this exact route thousands of times. He knew every waypoint, every radio frequency, every potential weather pattern. This was his route. His routine. In the right seat sat First Officer David Klein. Just 26 years old. Fresh-faced. Eager. Nervous. David had only 800 total flight hours. Only 200 of those hours were on the A320. He had finished his first officer training just 6 months ago. This was still new to him. Still exciting. Still a little scary. Weber liked David. The kid was smart. Careful. Followed procedures. Asked good questions. He would make a fine captain someday. Ready for another trip to Athens? Weber asked with a smile. Yes, sir, David replied, running through his pre-flight checklist. Relax, David. It's a beautiful evening. Clear skies all the way. We'll be sipping coffee in Athens before you know it. David nodded, but his hands were still a little tense on the controls. Weber noticed but said nothing. The nervousness would fade with time. With experience. Behind them, the cabin was filling up. 164 passengers. Business travelers heading home. Tourists going to see the Acropolis. Families on vacation. Students. Retirees. A normal mix. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, helping passengers stow luggage, checking seat belts, offering reassuring smiles. Senior flight attendant Anna Schmidt, 15 years with Lufthansa, did a final walkthrough. Everything looked good. At 6:43 p.m., the ground crew disconnected the jetway. At 6:45 p.m., Weber started the engines. Both engines spooled up smoothly. All indicators green. Everything perfect. At 6:47 p.m. exactly, Frankfurt Tower cleared them for takeoff. Lufthansa 437, runway 25 left, cleared for takeoff. Cleared for takeoff, runway 25 left, Lufthansa 437, Weber acknowledged. He advanced the throttles. The A320 rolled forward, gathering speed. David called out the numbers. 80 knots. Check, Weber confirmed. V1. The point of no return. They were committed to takeoff now. Rotate. Weber pulled back smoothly on the control yoke. The nose lifted. The main wheels left the runway. They were flying. Positive rate, David called. Gear up, Weber ordered. The landing gear retracted with a solid thunk. Clean aircraft. Climbing smoothly into the evening sky. 1,000 feet, David announced. Everything was perfect. Everything was routine. Everything was exactly as it should be. For 38 minutes. In the very back of the aircraft, in row 32, seats E and F, 2 women sat together. The last row. Right next to the lavatories. The seats nobody wants. The seats that vibrate more and smell like blue toilet chemicals. But they were the only 2 seats left together when they booked the flight 3 weeks ago. The woman in seat 32E was in her early 60s. She had short silver-gray hair, cut in a practical, no-nonsense style. Military short. She wore simple jeans and a plain blue blouse. On her collar was a small silver pin. Most people would not notice it. But to those who knew, it was unmistakable, an F-16 Viper silhouette. Only fighter pilots wore that pin. Her name was Maria Vasquez. Colonel Maria Vasquez, United States Air Force, retired. But to the gate agent who scanned her boarding pass, she was just another passenger. To the flight attendants, she was the quiet older woman in the last row who politely declined wine and asked for water instead. Nobody on this flight knew who she was. Nobody knew her history. Nobody knew her call sign. In seat 32F, next to Maria, sat her granddaughter. Zoe Vasquez, age 13. Dark curly hair pulled back in a ponytail. Wearing a purple hoodie and jeans. Reading a book about the history of fighter aircraft. They were on their way to Athens together. A grandmother-granddaughter vacation. Just the 2 of them. They were going to see the Acropolis, eat Greek food, walk through ancient ruins, spend quality time together before Zoe started high school next year. Maria looked over at Zoe and smiled. Still reading about planes? Always, Zoe said without looking up. Grandma, did you really fly 89 combat missions? I did. Were you scared? Maria thought for a moment. Every single time. But fear is not the enemy, Mija. Fear is information. It tells you to be careful. To be sharp. To be ready. The enemy is panic. Panic makes you stupid. Fear makes you smart. Zoe looked up from her book. Is that why they called you Angel? Maria's expression changed. Not sad, exactly. But distant. Remembering something from long ago. No, Mija. That name came from a different reason. Tell me again. Maria had told this story many times. But Zoe never got tired of hearing it. It was 1991. Gulf War. I was flying an F-16 over Baghdad. My mission was to take out a communication tower. I was at 18,000 feet when my cockpit filled with smoke. Electrical fire in the avionics bay. Smoke so thick I could not see the instruments. Could not see anything. Just choking, burning smoke. Zoe leaned closer. I could not eject. I was over enemy territory. If I ejected, I would be captured or killed. So I had to land the aircraft. But I could not see. The instruments were melting. The GPS was dead. I was blind. How did you do it? I flew by feel. By instinct. I knew what the aircraft felt like at certain speeds, certain angles. I knew the sound of the engine at different power settings. I descended toward the desert airstrip by memory, by guess, by prayer. When I felt the wheels touch the ground, I did not even know if I was on the runway or in the sand. But I was on the runway. I stopped the aircraft. The ground crews came running. They put out the fire. They pulled me out of the cockpit. And the crew chief looked at me and said, "Only an angel could have made that landing." And that became your call sign. That became my call sign. Angel. For 22 years, that was my name in the Air Force. Zoe smiled. I love that story. I know you do. But Mija, the lesson is not about being a hero. The lesson is about staying calm when everything is falling apart. About trusting yourself when you have nothing else to trust. That is what saves lives. Not heroics. Calm thinking. You always say that. Because it is always true. For years, Maria had been teaching Zoe about aviation. Not formally. Not like school. Just talking. Sharing stories. Explaining how aircraft work. What pilots do in emergencies. How to read instruments. How to stay calm under pressure. Grandma, why do you always tell me this stuff? Zoe had asked once. Because knowledge is survival, Mija. You never know when you will need it. I am never going to be a pilot. You don't have to be a pilot to save lives. You just have to remember what I teach you. Now, at 23,000 feet over the Austrian Alps, Zoe went back to her book. Maria closed her eyes and rested. Just 2 passengers in the last row. Nobody special. Nobody important. Just an old woman and a young girl. For 38 minutes, everything was calm. At exactly 7:25 p.m., 38 minutes into the flight, Captain Weber was setting the autopilot parameters for the cruise phase of the flight. They were at 23,000 feet, still climbing toward their cruise altitude of 35,000 feet. The cockpit was quiet. Professional. Routine. Weber reached for the altitude selector knob. And stopped. His hand froze in midair. David, His voice was strange. Tight. I don't feel. He clutched his left arm. His face went gray. His eyes went wide. Then he slumped forward over the control yoke. David stared in shock. Captain. Captain. The aircraft pitched down sharply as Weber's unconscious weight pressed the yoke forward. The nose dropped. The altimeter started unwinding. Captain Weber. David grabbed Weber's shoulder and shook him. Nothing. No response. Weber's head lolled to the side. His eyes were half open but unseeing. David's heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. This was not in the training. This was not in the simulator. This was real. A massive stroke. Right there. Right now. His mentor. His captain. Possibly dying right in front of him. The aircraft was descending fast. Too fast. David grabbed his own control yoke and pulled back hard. The A320 leveled out roughly at 22,000 feet. He was flying now. He was in control. But his hands would not stop shaking. 26 years old. 800 hours total flight time. 6 months out of training. And his captain was unconscious or dead and David was alone with 164 passengers depending on him. He keyed the PA system, trying to keep his voice steady. Flight attendants to the cockpit immediately. Medical emergency. 10 seconds later, Anna Schmidt burst through the cockpit door. She saw Weber slumped over and gasped. Oh my God. Help me get him out of the seat. David shouted. I need to fly. Anna and another attendant, Marcus, struggled to unbuckle Weber's harness and pull his unconscious body from the captain's seat. He was a big man. Heavy. Dead weight. They dragged him onto the cockpit floor. Is he breathing? David asked, not taking his eyes off the instruments. Anna checked. Yes. Barely. I think it's a stroke. Get the emergency medical kit. Do what you can. Anna ran back into the cabin. Marcus stayed, staring at Weber's gray face. David was now alone in the first officer's seat. The captain's seat was empty. He was the pilot in command now. Alone. He keyed the radio, his voice shaking. Munich Control, Lufthansa 437, we have a medical emergency. Captain is incapacitated. First officer is taking control of the aircraft. Lufthansa 437, Munich Control, copy your emergency. Do you require assistance? Yes. I need. Then David smelled something. Smoke. The smell was sharp. Chemical. Burning plastic and electronics. Acrid and toxic. David's eyes went wide. Do you smell that? Marcus nodded, his face pale. Smoke. It was coming from behind the instrument panel. From the avionics bay. The heart of the aircraft's electrical system. David looked down at the circuit breaker panel. Wisps of gray smoke were rising from the gaps around the breakers. Then he saw the first orange flicker. Fire. Small flames. Licking out from behind the panel. Growing. Fire in the cockpit. David screamed. Marcus grabbed the cockpit fire extinguisher from its mount and sprayed. White chemical foam covered the panel. The flames died down. But the smoke kept coming. Thicker now. Filling the cockpit. And the flames came back. David's instrument panel started flickering. The screens went dark. Came back. Went dark again. Primary flight display, fail. Navigation display, fail. Autopilot, disconnected. GPS, offline. Radio 1, dead static. The fire was melting the avionics. The brain of the aircraft was burning. David was now flying manually. No autopilot. No GPS. No navigation. Half his instruments were dead or dying. Smoke was filling his lungs. He could barely see. He keyed Radio 2, which was still working, Mayday Mayday Mayday. Lufthansa 437, cockpit fire, captain incapacitated, losing all avionics, I need immediate assistance. Lufthansa 437, Munich Control, we copy your mayday. What is your current position? David looked at his navigation display. Black screen. Dead. I don't know. My GPS is dead. I can't see my position. Lufthansa 437, can you estimate your position? I don't know. We were climbing through 23,000 feet over Austria, I think. I don't know exactly where. The panic was rising in his throat like bile. He could not breathe. Could not think. 26 years old. Barely qualified. Captain unconscious, probably dying. Cockpit on fire. No instruments. No idea where he was. Smoke choking him. This was it. This was how it ended. He was going to crash. He was going to kill everyone. Then a small voice came over the cabin intercom. In the back of the aircraft, the smoke was seeping into the cabin now. Thin wisps at first, then thicker. Passengers noticed. Some started coughing. Others looked around nervously. A few started to panic. Is something burning? Oh my God, is the plane on fire? We're going to crash. The flight attendants tried to maintain calm, but the fear was spreading like the smoke itself. Zoe looked at her grandmother. Grandma, something is wrong. The pilots are in trouble. Maria's trained eyes had already assessed the situation. Smoke in the cabin. Electrical smell. The aircraft handling was erratic, she could feel it in the way the plane moved. Small corrections. Overcorrections. An inexperienced hand on the controls. She knew what was happening. The captain was down. A junior first officer was flying alone. And there was a fire. The exact scenario from Iraq. The scenario that had earned her the call sign Angel. Mija, listen to me very carefully, Maria said, her voice urgent. That first officer up there is young and scared. He needs help. I need to tell him what to do. She unbuckled her seatbelt and tried to stand. And collapsed back into her seat, coughing violently. Deep, racking coughs that shook her whole body. The smoke. She had inhaled too much smoke. Her lungs, already damaged from years of breathing jet fuel, smoke, and toxic fumes during her career, could not handle it. Could not process it. She gasped for air, but each breath brought more smoke, more coughing, more pain. Grandma. Zoe grabbed her arm. Maria clutched Zoe's hand, her voice barely a whisper, each word costing her precious air. Zoe, you have to, tell him for me. Tell who? Tell him what? The first officer, cockpit fire, same as mine in Iraq. Maria's voice was fading. Her face was turning gray. She was suffocating. But she kept talking. Forcing the words out. Tell him, smoke means fire, fire means time, everything happens fast, get below 10,000 feet, breathable air, oxygen masks can't help with smoke. She coughed again, harder. Blood flecked her lips. Visual navigation, follow the Danube River southeast, it leads to Vienna, land there if fire spreads, don't try to make Athens. Grandma, you need to rest. No. Maria grabbed Zoe's face with both hands, looking directly into her granddaughter's eyes. Listen. Tell him to trust his instincts, not his fear. Tell him. Angel says, he can do this. Maria's eyes were starting to close. Her grip weakened. Tell him, stay calm, fly the plane, nothing else matters. Then Maria slumped unconscious in her seat. Grandma. Zoe shook her. No response. Her grandmother's head lolled to the side. Zoe was 13 years old. Her grandmother, her hero, her teacher, her best friend, was unconscious. Maybe dying. The aircraft was filling with smoke. People were screaming. And nobody knew what to do. Except Zoe knew what her grandmother would want her to do. Maria had not taught her all those lessons for nothing. Had not spent years explaining aviation emergencies for nothing. Had not drilled into her head the importance of staying calm for nothing. Zoe unbuckled and ran to the back galley. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was clear. On the wall was a cabin phone. The one connected directly to the cockpit intercom. She grabbed it. Pressed the button. Heard it click. Hello. First officer. Can you hear me? In the cockpit, David was losing his mind. Smoke filled the small space. His eyes were burning. He could barely see the instruments that were still working. The fire extinguisher had slowed the flames but not stopped them. The avionics were failing one by one. He was coughing. Choking. Flying blind through smoke and terror. Then he heard the small voice over the intercom. A child's voice. Young. Female. Scared but somehow steady. First officer, this is passenger seat 32F. My name is Zoe. I'm 13 years old. David stared at the intercom speaker. What? Why was a child calling the cockpit? My grandmother is Colonel Maria Vasquez, United States Air Force, retired. Her call sign is Angel. She flew F-16 fighter jets for 22 years. David's hand froze on the control yoke. She's unconscious right now from smoke inhalation, but before she passed out, she told me what to tell you. She said she had the exact same emergency in Iraq. A cockpit fire in an F-16. She landed it blind. She knows what you need to do. What? Who is? Please listen. Zoe's voice was urgent now. She said smoke means fire and fire means time. You need to descend below 10,000 feet right now. You need breathable air. The oxygen masks can't help with smoke. If you stay this high, the smoke will kill everyone. David's training kicked in. Emergency descent for smoke and fire, get below 10,000 feet immediately. He had learned it in training. But in his panic, he had forgotten. He pushed the control yoke forward hard. The nose dropped. The aircraft descended rapidly. I'm descending, he shouted into the intercom. What else did she say? Zoe's voice was shaking but clear. She said if your GPS is dead, use visual navigation. Look out the window. Find a river. The Danube River runs southeast toward Vienna. Follow it. Use it as a guide. David looked out the window. It was twilight now, the sky turning deep purple. Below, he could see terrain. Mountains. And there, a silver ribbon cutting through the landscape. A river. The Danube. I see it. I see the river. Follow it southeast. It leads directly to Vienna. She says land there. Don't try to make it to Athens. The fire is spreading. You don't have time. Vienna is close. Land there. David's mind was racing. Vienna. Yes. Vienna International Airport. Big airport. Long runways. Emergency equipment. Okay. Okay. I'm following the river. Tell your grandmother thank you. Zoe's voice came back, smaller now. She also said, she said to trust your instincts, not your fear. She said young pilots rely on instruments because they're scared to trust themselves. But you already know how to fly. You've done this hundreds of times. Stop looking for numbers and feel the aircraft. Listen to the engines. Feel the controls. You know what's right. She paused. She said Angel believes you can do this. David felt something break inside him. Not fear breaking him down. But something else breaking through. Confidence. This fighter pilot legend, this woman he had never met, believed in him. And somehow, that changed everything. At Munich Area Control Center, Controller Stefan Mueller was listening to the radio traffic with growing horror. Lufthansa 437, did someone just say call sign Angel? Colonel Maria Vasquez? There was a pause. Then the child's voice came back. Yes. That's my grandmother. She's unconscious but she told me what to tell the pilot before she passed out. Stefan dropped his pen. It clattered on the desk. He grabbed the phone to his supervisor's desk. Klaus. Klaus. Supervisor Klaus Weber, no relation to the captain, picked up. What? Colonel Maria Vasquez is on Lufthansa 437. Klaus went pale. Angel? The Angel? Yes. She's unconscious from smoke inhalation, but she's relaying instructions through her 13-year-old granddaughter. Klaus stood up fast, his chair rolling backward. Angel is on that aircraft? Everyone in the control room was listening now. The name Angel meant something to anyone who knew military aviation history. The legend from the Gulf War. The fighter pilot who had landed an F-16 with a cockpit fire while completely blind. The woman who had trained 3 generations of fighter pilots. Stefan keyed his microphone, Lufthansa 437, Munich Control. If Colonel Vasquez says follow the Danube to Vienna, do it. Her judgment is better than ours. We're coordinating with Vienna now. Emergency equipment will be standing by. He paused, emotion thick in his voice. And tell that 13-year-old girl, tell her the entire air traffic control system just went silent in respect. Because Angel is saving lives again. Around the control room, controllers at their stations stopped talking. Stopped moving. They just listened. A legend was at work. Even unconscious, even through the voice of a terrified child, Angel was flying. For the next 34 minutes, Zoe Vasquez, 13 years old, sitting in the back of a burning aircraft with her unconscious grandmother slumped beside her, became the voice of a fighter pilot legend. She stood in the galley, cabin phone pressed to her ear, smoke getting thicker around her, passengers crying and praying, flight attendants trying to maintain order. And she relayed every instruction her grandmother had whispered before losing consciousness. David, the fire is getting worse. More instruments are failing. I don't know what's working anymore. Zoe, Grandma said when instruments fail, fly by feel. Airspeed, altitude, heading, you can estimate all of them. Engine sound tells you airspeed. Control pressure tells you speed and angle. You've flown this aircraft hundreds of hours. Your hands know what 250 knots feels like. Your body knows what level flight feels like. Stop looking for numbers. Feel it. David, I can't. I've only got 800 hours. I'm not experienced enough to fly by feel. Zoe's voice was firm now, channeling her grandmother's confidence. She said young pilots rely on instruments because they're scared to trust themselves. But she said you know what this aircraft feels like. You've landed it before. You've flown approaches before. You know the sounds, the vibrations, the control pressures. Trust what you already know. David closed his eyes for just 2 seconds. Listened to the engines. Felt the yoke in his hands. The resistance. The pressure. Zoe was right. Maria was right. He did know this. He had flown 250 knots 100 times. He knew what it felt like. He was going too fast. About 280 knots. He could feel it in the control pressure. He pulled back the throttles slightly. The engine's pitch changed. The controls felt different. Lighter. Better. That was 250 knots. He knew it. Not from a number on a screen. From his hands. From his experience. It was working. Meanwhile, in the cabin, flight attendant Anna Schmidt was moving through the rows, trying to keep passengers calm. But panic was spreading like wildfire. A businessman in row 15 was shouting, "We're all going to die. The plane is on fire." A mother in row 8 was clutching her 2 children, tears streaming down her face. An elderly man in row 22 was praying loudly in German. Anna reached the back galley where Zoe stood with the phone pressed to her ear. The young girl's face was streaked with tears, but her voice was steady as she spoke to the cockpit. "Who is she talking to?" a passenger asked Anna. "The first officer. She's helping him fly the plane. She's just a child. She's Colonel Vasquez's granddaughter. And right now, she's the only reason we have a chance." The passengers nearby fell silent. Some began to listen to Zoe's side of the conversation. Others pulled out their phones to record what might be their final moments. But something strange happened. As they listened to this 13-year-old girl calmly relaying instructions, speaking with confidence and clarity that belied her age, the panic began to subside. If this child could stay calm, maybe they could too. At 15,000 feet, descending. "David, I can see Vienna ahead. The city lights. But I don't have approach charts. I don't know the runway headings. I don't know the frequencies." "Zoe," she said in an emergency, "you don't need charts. Look for the brightest lights. That's the airport. The long straight dark spaces are runways. Pick the longest one that's aligned with your approach direction. Land on it." David could see the city now. A sprawling carpet of lights in the darkness. And there, brighter than everything else, was the airport. He could make out the parallel runways, lit up like bright lines in the night. I see it. I see the airport. At 14,000 feet, Munich Control came back on the radio. Lufthansa 437, Munich Control. Vienna Tower is standing by on frequency 118.1. They're clearing all traffic. The airport is yours. Every emergency vehicle in the city is standing by. David's hands were shaking as he reached for the radio frequency selector. But the panel was partially melted. He could not change frequencies. Munich, I can't switch frequencies. My radio panel is damaged. Understood, 437. We'll relay all communications. Vienna Tower is listening on this frequency now. You're cleared straight into runway 29. Wind is 270 at 8 knots. Visibility 10 kilometers. You are number 1. No other traffic. At 12,000 feet. David, what if I'm too fast? Too high? I don't have glide slope guidance. I've never done a visual approach without instruments. Zoe, Grandma said don't overthink it. If you're high, descend. If you're fast, slow down. The aircraft wants to land. Let it. Don't fight it. She paused, then added something her grandmother had told her years ago during one of their long talks about flying. She also said that the best pilots are the ones who can make the aircraft do what needs to be done without thinking about it. Your body knows how to fly. Your training is in your muscles, in your hands, in your instincts. Trust that. Let your training take over. David took a deep breath. She was right. He had done this before. Hundreds of practice approaches. Dozens of real landings. His body knew what to do. At 10,000 feet. The smoke in the cabin was bad now. People were coughing, gasping. Oxygen masks had dropped but they did not help with smoke. The smell of burning was everywhere. Zoe was coughing too. Her eyes were watering. But she stayed on the phone. David, the smoke is so bad I can barely see. How did your grandmother land when she couldn't see anything? Zoe, coughing, she said she landed by feel. By the sound of the wind, the feel of the controls, the moment the wheels touched. She said humans flew for thousands of years before we had instruments. Trust your senses. They're enough. In the cabin, passengers were starting to lose hope. The smoke was getting thicker. Some people were slumping in their seats, overcome by smoke inhalation. A flight attendant, Marcus, made an announcement over the PA, everyone, please stay in your seats. Cover your nose and mouth with a wet cloth if possible. We are descending. We will be on the ground soon. Stay calm. Stay strong. But his own voice was shaking with fear. Then, over the same PA system, passengers heard Zoe's young voice coming through from the galley phone connection. First Officer Klein, you're doing amazing. My grandmother would be so proud of you. You can do this. I know you can. The cabin fell silent. That small voice. That confidence. That faith. A woman in row 18 started to cry, but not from fear. From hope. If that little girl believes he can do it, she whispered to her husband, then maybe he can. At 8,000 feet, two F-15 Eagles from the Austrian Air Force appeared on Lufthansa 437's wings. They had scrambled from Zeltweg Air Base the moment Munich Control reported a burning airliner heading toward Vienna. The lead pilot, Major Kurt Fischer, call sign Falcon Lead, pulled alongside the smoking A320 and assessed the damage. What he saw made his blood run cold. Lufthansa 437, this is Austrian Air Force Falcon Lead. I have visual contact. David looked out the window and saw the gray fighter jet keeping perfect formation just off his left wing. Falcon Lead, Lufthansa 437. Thank God you're here. Lufthansa 437, I need to give you a situation report. Your left engine is trailing heavy smoke. Your fuselage has scorch marks running along the left side. You have visible flames coming from beneath the cockpit area. Sir, you are literally on fire right now. David felt his stomach drop. He knew the fire was bad. But hearing it described from outside was terrifying. Zoe's voice came through the intercom. Grandma said fire in flight means you have minutes, not hours. First officer, you need to land now. Don't try to set up a perfect approach. Just get it on the ground. Major Fisher heard the young voice over the radio and was confused. Lufthansa 437, who is that? That's a 13-year-old passenger, David said. Her grandmother is Colonel Maria Vasquez. Call sign Angel. She's unconscious but... Angel? Fisher's voice went sharp. Colonel Vasquez is on your aircraft? Yes. There was a pause. Then Fisher's voice came back, full of emotion. Lufthansa 437, my father flew with Angel in the Gulf War. She is a legend. If she says you can do this, then you can do this. I'm going to guide you in visually. Stay on my wing. I'll show you the runway. Thank you, Falcon Lead. And Lufthansa 437. Tell that 13-year-old girl her grandmother is the bravest pilot I've ever heard of. What she's doing right now, relaying those instructions, that's heroic. Zoe, listening on the intercom, started crying. Not from fear. From pride. At 5,000 feet, Vienna International Airport was directly ahead. The city lights spread out below like a glowing carpet. David could see the airport. The bright lights. The runways. Falcon Lead, I have the airport in sight. Copy. I'm going to guide you to runway 29. It's the longest runway, 11,800 feet. More than enough for an A320. I'll position you on a straight-in approach. Understood. Fisher maneuvered his F-15 ahead of the Lufthansa aircraft, guiding it toward the runway centerline. At 3,000 feet, Zoe's voice, Grandma said when you're on fire, don't try to be smooth or perfect. Get the aircraft on the ground and stop. That's all that matters. Hard landing is better than no landing. David's mind flashed to his training. All those hours in the simulator. The instructors always emphasized smooth landings. Gentle touchdowns. Perfect technique. But this was not training. This was survival. I understand, he said. I'll get it down. At 2,500 feet, Vienna Tower came on the radio through Munich control relay. Lufthansa 437, Vienna Tower. All emergency services are in position. We have 24 fire trucks, 12 ambulances, rescue teams, foam trucks. The entire airport is shut down for you. You are our only priority. The whole city is praying for you. David's voice cracked. Thank you, Vienna Tower. We are with you all the way to the ground. You're going to make it. At 2,200 feet, the left engine suddenly gave a loud metallic bang. The entire aircraft shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed on the damaged instrument panel. What was that? David shouted. Major Fisher, flying formation on the left, saw it happen. Lufthansa 437, your left engine just threw a compressor blade. You're losing power on that engine. It's failing. David felt the aircraft yaw hard to the left as the damaged engine lost thrust. He pressed hard on the right rudder pedal, fighting to keep the aircraft straight. Engine failure. Left engine is dying. The engine gauges, the few that still worked, showed the left engine spooling down. Temperature rising. Vibration off the scale. Shut it down. Fisher commanded. Shut down the left engine before it catches fire. David's hand flew to the engine fire handle. He pulled it. The left engine shut down completely. Now they were flying on one engine. One engine on a damaged, burning aircraft. The A320 became sluggish, heavy. The controls felt mushy. "Can you still fly it?" Fisher asked urgently. David gritted his teeth. "I have to." In the back of the aircraft, passengers felt the violent shudder when the engine failed. People screamed. Some thought this was the end. But Zoe's voice came over the intercom again, calm and steady. "Everyone, please stay calm. The first officer is in control. We're almost on the ground. My grandmother says single-engine landings are routine. We're going to be okay. Trust him. He's got this." How did this 13-year-old girl stay so calm? Some passengers wondered. Where did she get such courage? But those who knew about Maria Vasquez understood. Courage was taught. Passed down. Grandmother to granddaughter. Legend to legacy. At 2,000 feet. "Landing gear," Fisher called. "Extend your landing gear." David reached for the gear lever. His hand was shaking so badly he almost could not grip it. What if the hydraulics were damaged by the fire? What if the gear would not come down? What if they had to do a belly landing on one engine with the aircraft on fire? He pulled the lever. Nothing happened for 3 long, terrible seconds. David's heart stopped. Then, clunk. 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 3 solid sounds as the landing gear extended and locked into place. 3 green lights illuminated on the panel. Gear down and locked. David shouted, almost sobbing with relief. "Good." Fisher replied. "You're doing great. Now give me full flaps." David extended the flaps fully. The aircraft slowed further, pitched nose up. The single remaining engine was screaming, struggling to maintain airspeed and altitude. At 1,500 feet, the cockpit suddenly filled with even thicker smoke. Black, choking smoke that made David cough and gag. "I can't see. The smoke is too thick. I can't see the instruments. I can't see the runway." Panic was rising in his throat again. How could he land if he could not see? "Lufthansa 437, this is Falcon Lead." Fisher's voice was calm, authoritative, like a father talking to a frightened son. "Listen to me carefully. I am your eyes now. Look out your left window. Do you see my aircraft?" David turned his head left. Through the thick smoke filling the cockpit, through his burning, watering eyes, he could barely make out the gray shape of the F-15 flying in perfect formation just 50 feet away. "I see you." "Good. Keep your eyes on me. I'm going to guide you down. When I say pull up, you pull up. When I say push down, you push down. When I say you're perfect, you hold exactly what you've got. Do you trust me?" David had never met this man before today. Did not know his first name. Did not know anything about him except his call sign. But right now, in this moment, Major Kurt Fisher was the only thing standing between David and disaster. Between life and death for 164 people. "I trust you. Then let's bring this bird home." At 1,200 feet, a new fire alarm started blaring in the cockpit. The aft cargo hold. Fire in the rear cargo hold. David shouted. "Ignore it." Fisher commanded firmly. "You're 90 seconds from the ground. Nothing matters except flying this aircraft. Focus on my voice. Focus on my aircraft. Ignore everything else." At 1,000 feet. "You're lined up perfectly," Fisher said, his voice steady as a rock. "Nose attitude looks good. Airspeed looks about 160 knots. That's perfect for a single-engine approach. You're doing everything right. Just hold what you've got." At 800 feet, Zoe's voice came through the intercom one more time. And this time, she was not relaying her grandmother's instructions. She was speaking from her own heart. First Officer Klein. David. I need to tell you something. Her voice was shaking now, the fear finally breaking through. But she kept talking. My grandma told me once that the moment right before you land is when fear is the strongest. Because you're so close to safety, but you're also so close to disaster. Everything could still go wrong. David could hear her crying now. She said the best pilots are the ones who can push through that fear. Who can just do what needs to be done, even when they're terrified. Even when every part of them wants to give up. Zoe took a shaky breath. And David, you're the bravest person I've ever known. You didn't give up when the captain collapsed. You didn't give up when the fire started. You didn't give up when the engine failed. You didn't give up when you couldn't see. You just kept going. Her voice grew stronger. My grandma believes in you. I believe in you. Everyone on this plane believes in you. You're going to land this aircraft. You're going to save us all. I know you will. At 600 feet, tears were streaming down David's face, mixing with the sweat and soot covering his skin. Thank you, Zoe, he whispered. Thank your grandmother for me. At 500 feet, Fisher's voice, looking good, David. The runway is right in front of you. I can see it clearly. You're perfectly aligned. Steady as she goes. At 400 feet, Munich control came on, Lufthansa 437, every controller in Europe is listening right now. Every pilot monitoring this frequency. You're not alone up there. We're all with you. At 300 feet, the fire alarm grew louder. The smoke grew thicker. But David kept his eyes locked on Fisher's F-15. You're doing perfect, Fisher said. 300 feet. Sink rate is good. Airspeed is good. At 200 feet, Fisher said, David, your nose is slightly high. Give me just a tiny push forward. Just a touch. David pushed the yoke forward gently. The nose dropped a fraction. Perfect. Hold that exactly. At 150 feet, David could finally see the runway through the smoke. Bright lights lining both sides. Fire trucks everywhere, red and white lights flashing like Christmas. At 100 feet, Fisher said, you're 50 feet from saving everyone on that aircraft. 50 feet from being a hero. Start your flare. Now. David pulled back gently on the yoke. The nose started to rise. At 50 feet, good flare. Looking beautiful. At 30 feet, Fisher's voice was filled with emotion, almost there, David. 20 feet. 10 feet. You've got this. Flare hard now. David pulled back with everything he had. The main wheels slammed onto the runway. Bang! The hardest landing David had ever made. The aircraft bounced once, hard. Came back down even harder. Bang! But they were down. The wheels were on the ground. The nose wheel dropped and hit the pavement with a violent crash. David deployed the thrust reverser on the single working right engine and slammed both feet on the brake pedals as hard as he could. The tires screamed. The aircraft shuddered. But it was slowing. Emergency vehicles were already racing alongside, keeping pace. 2,000 feet down the runway. Still going too fast. 3,000 feet. David pressed the brakes harder. His legs were shaking with the effort. 3,500 feet. The aircraft was slowing, but would they stop in time? The runway was only 11,800 feet long. They were eating it up fast. 4,000 feet. Come on, stop. 4,200 feet down the runway, exactly 62 seconds after touchdown, Lufthansa Flight 437 came to a complete stop. Dead silence in the cockpit. David sat frozen, hands still gripping the yoke, feet still pressing the brakes, unable to move. Unable to process what had just happened. He had done it. He had actually done it. Then he keyed the PA with a shaking hand, his voice breaking, "Ladies and gentlemen. We're down. We're safe. We made it." At 500 feet, Zoe's voice came one more time. Small. Scared. But steady. "Grandma said, she said to tell you that landing a burning plane isn't about being perfect. It's about being brave. She says you're brave. She believes in you. I believe in you. Everyone on this plane believes in you." David felt tears running down his face. Not from fear. From something else. Something stronger. At 200 feet, Fisher called, "Looking good. Hold what you've got." At 100 feet, 50 feet. "Start your flare." At 50 feet, David pulled back gently on the yoke. At 30 feet, Fisher's voice was calm, 20 feet. 10 feet. "Flare now." David pulled back hard. The main wheels slammed onto the runway. Hard. Rough. But controlled. The nose wheel dropped. David deployed the thrust reversers and slammed on the brakes. The A320 rolled down the runway, smoke pouring from every seam, emergency vehicles chasing it with lights flashing and sirens wailing. 4,200 feet down the runway, the aircraft stopped. Complete silence in the cockpit. Then David keyed the PA, "We're down. We're safe. We made it." The cabin erupted. Screaming. Crying. Praying. Cheering. Sobbing. Hugging. They were alive. All 164 passengers. All 6 crew members. Alive. Because of a 26-year-old first officer who found courage he did not know he had. Because of an unconscious fighter pilot legend who trained her granddaughter well. And because of a 13-year-old girl who refused to let fear stop her from saving lives. Emergency crews swarmed the aircraft the moment it stopped. Fire trucks surrounded it, spraying foam on the smoldering fuselage. Paramedics boarded through the front and rear doors simultaneously. In the cockpit, they found Captain Weber on the floor. Unconscious but alive. Vital signs stable. Massive stroke, but he would survive. They loaded him onto a stretcher and rushed him to a waiting ambulance. In the back of the aircraft, they found Colonel Maria Vasquez slumped in seat 32E. Unconscious. Severe smoke inhalation. But breathing. As they were loading her onto a stretcher, her eyes flickered open. "Mija." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Did he land?" Zoe was beside her, holding her hand, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Grandma. We're safe. We're on the ground. You saved us." Maria smiled weakly. "No, Mija. You saved them. You were my voice. You did what I couldn't do. I was so scared. Fear is normal. Courage is acting anyway. You have angel's courage now. You always did." Then her eyes closed again as the paramedics carried her away. Zoe stood alone in the empty cabin, shaking, crying, but somehow proud. The investigation began immediately. Austrian aviation authorities, German aviation authorities, Lufthansa safety teams, Airbus engineers, everyone descended on Vienna to figure out what happened. The initial findings were shocking. The fire had not been an accident. It had been deliberate sabotage. Investigators found a small incendiary device wired into the avionics bay of Flight 437. It was designed to burn slowly, melting wires and starting an electrical fire that would look like a normal system failure. But this device was not unique to Flight 437. Within 48 hours, they had grounded 6 Lufthansa A320 aircraft and found identical devices in all of them. The saboteur was identified quickly, Martin Richter, age 47, former Lufthansa maintenance contractor. Richter had been fired from Lufthansa 8 months earlier for repeatedly violating safety procedures. He blamed the airline for ruining his career. He wanted revenge. But he claimed he had never intended to kill anyone. "I just wanted to expose their lax safety oversight," he told investigators. "I wanted the planes to have minor electrical problems so they'd have to ground the fleet and investigate. I wanted to embarrass them. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." But his devices had not caused minor electrical problems. They had caused catastrophic fires. He had not known that one of his devices would ignite while a captain was having a stroke. He had not known that a junior first officer would be forced to fly manually with no instruments. He had not known that a 13-year-old girl would have to relay instructions from a dying fighter pilot legend to save 164 lives. Martin Richter was arrested and charged with 164 counts of attempted murder, sabotage, and terrorism. His trial would be one of the most publicized in German aviation history. 3 weeks later, Colonel Maria Vasquez sat at a press conference in Frankfurt. She was still weak. Still recovering from the smoke inhalation that had nearly killed her. Her voice was hoarse, her breathing sometimes labored. But she was alive. And she had insisted on being here. Beside her sat Zoe. Small. Uncomfortable in the bright camera lights. Wearing a simple blue dress her mother had bought for the occasion. Her hands were folded nervously in her lap. The room was packed with journalists from around the world. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, Deutsche Welle, every major news network had sent crews. Cameras flashed constantly. Microphones crowded the table in front of them. Also at the table, First Officer David Klein, looking uncomfortable in a formal Lufthansa uniform. Captain Hans Weber, still recovering from his stroke but determined to attend. The CEO of Lufthansa. Representatives from the German Aviation Authority. But all eyes were on Maria and Zoe. The moderator opened the floor for questions. Hands shot up immediately. A reporter from Der Spiegel stood. "Colonel Vasquez, you were unconscious during the entire emergency. You could not speak to the first officer directly. Yet somehow you saved the flight. Can you explain how?" Maria put her arm around Zoe and pulled her close. "I didn't save anything," she said, her voice firm despite its hoarseness. "My granddaughter did. I gave her instructions with my last conscious breath. She delivered them perfectly. She stayed calm when adults 3 times her age were panicking. She never quit. She never doubted. She saved 164 lives. Not me. Her." Zoe looked down at the table, embarrassed, her cheeks flushing red. A reporter from CNN stood. "Zoe, you're only 13 years old. How did you stay so calm?" Most adults would have completely panicked in that situation. Zoe's voice was quiet at first, barely audible. "Because my grandma always told me, knowledge is survival. She's been teaching me about aviation my whole life. Not because she thought I'd ever need it. Just because she wanted me to understand how things work. She looked up at the cameras. She taught me to listen carefully. To remember what I'm told. To act when action is needed. That night on the plane, I just did what she taught me. I remembered her lessons. I remembered her voice. I became her voice when she couldn't speak." Another reporter: "What was going through your mind when you picked up that phone to call the cockpit?" Zoe thought for a moment. "Fear. Lots of fear. I was terrified. My grandma was unconscious. The plane was on fire. People were screaming. I thought we were all going to die." She paused. "But then I remembered something my grandma told me once. She said fear doesn't make you weak. Fear is just information. It tells you the situation is serious. It tells you to be careful. But panic is what kills you. Panic makes you stupid. So I felt the fear, but I didn't let it control me. A reporter from the BBC, there's been talk about giving you an award for bravery. How do you feel about that? Zoe shook her head quickly. I don't want an award. I just want people to understand something important. She looked directly at the camera. Heroes don't always save you themselves. Sometimes they teach you how to save yourself. My grandma couldn't fly that plane. She was unconscious. But she had taught me enough that I could help someone else fly it. That's what real heroes do. They pass knowledge on. They prepare you. They teach you. And when the moment comes that you need them, you're ready because they made you ready. The room went silent for a moment. Then it erupted in applause. Maria was crying. Proud tears running down her weathered face. A military reporter stood. Colonel Vasquez, your call sign Angel, came from landing an F-16 with a cockpit fire in Iraq while completely blind. The similarities to this situation are remarkable. Did you immediately recognize what was happening? Maria nodded. The moment I smelled the electrical fire and felt how the aircraft was being handled, I knew. A young pilot, alone, terrified, flying blind. I lived that exact nightmare in 1991. I knew exactly what he needed to hear. And what was that? That he already knew how to do this. That his training was enough. That he needed to trust his instincts, not his fear. Young pilots always doubt themselves. They think they need more experience, more hours, more practice. But in emergencies, you don't have time for doubt. You have to trust what you already know. Another reporter, First Officer Klein, can you describe what it was like to hear a 13-year-old girl's voice giving you instructions to land a burning aircraft? David Klein leaned forward to his microphone. His voice was emotional. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. The stress, the smoke, maybe I was dying and hearing things. But then she said her grandmother was Colonel Maria Vasquez, call sign Angel. And I remembered hearing about Angel in flight school. The legend who landed blind. The fighter pilot who defied death. He looked at Maria and Zoe. And suddenly I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. Like this legendary pilot was there with me, even though she was unconscious in the back of the plane. Through Zoe's voice, Angel was flying with me. Guiding me. Believing in me. It gave me courage I didn't know I had. His voice cracked. They saved me as much as I saved them. I was drowning in fear and panic. They threw me a rope. They reminded me that I already knew how to fly. That I already had the skills. I just needed to trust myself. A reporter from Reuters, what do you want people to remember about this incident? Maria stood up slowly, leaning on the table for support. Her voice grew stronger. I want people to remember that preparation saves lives. That teaching matters. That passing on knowledge to the next generation is the most important thing we can do. She put her hand on Zoe's shoulder. I spent 22 years as a fighter pilot. I flew 89 combat missions. I earned medals and awards. But the most important thing I ever did was teach my granddaughter. Not formally. Not in a classroom. Just talking. Sharing stories. Explaining how things work. Being patient with her questions. She looked at Zoe with immense pride. And when the moment came that lives depended on that knowledge, she was ready. A 13-year-old child saved 164 adults because her grandmother took the time to teach her. That's the real story here. Not heroics. Not dramatic rescues. But the quiet work of teaching that happens every day between generations. The applause was thunderous. In the back of the room, Captain Hans Weber was crying. He raised his hand weakly, and the moderator acknowledged him. I just want to say, Weber's voice was still affected by the stroke, slurred slightly, that First Officer Klein saved my life and the lives of everyone on that aircraft. He showed courage beyond his years. And I want everyone to know that I have personally recommended him for early promotion to captain. More applause. Weber continued, but I also want to acknowledge something else. When I was being loaded into the ambulance at Vienna, unconscious, the last thing I remember hearing was a little girl's voice saying, "We made it, Grandma. We're safe." Even in my confused state, I knew something extraordinary had happened. I didn't know the details until later. But I knew an angel had been on that flight. He looked at Maria and Zoe. Two angels, actually. One who flew, and one who spoke. Angel and Echo. You saved us all. In the back of the room, David Klein sat quietly, watching the press conference. He had tried to stay out of the spotlight. He was not comfortable with attention. He just wanted to go back to flying. But a reporter spotted him. "First Officer Klein. How do you feel about what happened?" David stood awkwardly. All the cameras turned toward him. I was terrified. I thought we were going to die. I thought I was going to kill everyone. But then I heard Zoe's voice. And I heard Colonel Vasquez's instructions through her. And somehow it gave me courage I didn't know I had. He looked at Maria and Zoe. They saved me as much as I saved them. I was drowning in fear. They threw me a rope. They reminded me that I already knew how to fly. That I already had the skills. I just needed to trust myself. He paused, emotion thick in his voice. I owe them my life. All 164 people on that plane owe them our lives. Maria stood, walked over to David, and hugged him. You did good, son. Angel is proud of you. David broke down crying. 6 months after the incident, the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, announced a new emergency procedure. It was called the Vasquez Protocol. The protocol formalized the use of relay communication during pilot incapacitation emergencies. If a qualified pilot, military or civilian, retired or active, is a passenger on an aircraft experiencing an emergency, they can communicate instructions to the flight crew through a designated relay person, flight attendant, passenger, or anyone capable of relaying information clearly. The protocol was written based on exactly what happened on Lufthansa Flight 437. It included specific training for flight attendants on how to identify qualified pilots among passengers and how to facilitate communication during emergencies. It included guidelines for passengers on how to assist if they have aviation knowledge. It was adopted by airlines worldwide within a year. The Vasquez Protocol has since been credited with saving lives in 3 other incidents where incapacitated pilots were assisted by off-duty or retired pilots communicating through intermediaries. Maria was invited to ICAO headquarters in Montreal to witness the formal adoption of the protocol. She brought Zoe with her. This is your legacy too, Mija, Maria said. You showed the world that courage has no age limit. 8 months after the incident, Zoe stood at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. The F-16 demonstration team was performing a special air show. The theme, Legends of the Sky. Before the show began, the announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. Today's demonstration is dedicated to Colonel Maria Angel Vasquez and her granddaughter Zoe Vasquez. They proved that legends don't just fly. They teach. They inspire. They save lives even when they can't speak. The crowd of thousands erupted in applause. The F-16s roared overhead in tight formation, trailing red, white, and blue smoke. After the show, the base commander, Brigadier General Patricia Hawkins, approached Maria and Zoe. Colonel Vasquez, we would like to offer Zoe a guaranteed slot at the United States Air Force Academy when she turns 18. Full scholarship. Flight training included if she wants it. No strings attached. She's earned it. Zoe's eyes went wide. Really? Really? Zoe looked at her grandmother. What do you think, Grandma? Should I do it? Maria smiled. I think you already proved you have what it takes. Whether you fly jets or not doesn't matter. You'll save lives either way. But if flying is what you want, then fly. Zoe thought for a long moment. Can I have a call sign? The general smiled. You already have one. The fighter pilot community has already given you a call sign. Do you want to know what it is? Yes. Call sign Echo. Because you echoed your grandmother's voice when she couldn't speak. And because echoes carry messages across distances. They carry knowledge. They carry wisdom. Just like you did. Zoe looked at her grandmother, tears in her eyes. Call sign Echo. I like it. Maria pulled her granddaughter close. Angel and Echo. We make a good team. The best team, Grandma. Today, 5 years later, Zoe Vasquez is 18 years old. She is a cadet at the United States Air Force Academy. She is training to be a pilot. Her call sign is still Echo. Colonel Maria Vasquez is 68 years old now. Fully recovered. She volunteers as an instructor for the Civil Air Patrol, teaching young people about aviation, leadership, and courage. First Officer David Klein is now Captain David Klein. He flies for Lufthansa, still on the Frankfurt-Athens route. He has 5,800 flight hours now. He is a mentor to young first officers, just like Captain Weber was to him. Captain Hans Weber recovered from his stroke. He retired from flying but works as a flight safety consultant. He and David remain close friends. Martin Richter is serving 25 consecutive life sentences in a German prison. He will never see freedom again. Lufthansa Flight 437 has become a case study in aviation schools worldwide. Students learn about crew resource management, emergency decision-making, and the importance of staying calm under pressure. But most of all, they learn about courage. The courage of a 26-year-old first officer who trusted himself when everything was falling apart. The courage of a fighter pilot legend who, even while unconscious, saved lives through the lessons she had taught. And the courage of a 13-year-old girl who refused to let fear silence her. On February 15 every year, the anniversary of the emergency landing, Vienna International Airport holds a small ceremony at the end of runway 29. A plaque marks the spot where Lufthansa Flight 437 came to a stop. The inscription reads: On this runway, 164 lives were saved by courage, knowledge, and love. First Officer David Klein trusted his training. Colonel Maria Angel Vasquez taught her granddaughter well. Zoe Echo Vasquez became a voice for those who could not speak. Together, they proved that legends never die. They teach. They inspire. They save lives. Angel and Echo, a legacy of courage. Every year, Maria and Zoe visit that plaque together. They stand in silence for a moment, remembering that terrible evening. Then Zoe asks the same question she asks every year. Grandma, do you think we did good? And Maria gives the same answer she gives every year. Mija, we didn't just do good. We showed the world what love and courage can do when they work together. We showed them that age doesn't matter. Experience doesn't matter. What matters is staying calm, trusting what you know, and acting when action is needed. She pauses. You saved 164 lives when you were 13 years old. Most people will never save one life in their entire lifetime. You are extraordinary. Zoe smiles. I learned from the best. And now you'll teach others. That's how legends work. They pass it on. Generation to generation. Teacher to student. Grandmother to granddaughter. Angel to Echo. Angel to Echo. They stand together at the end of the runway, watching aircraft take off and land. Safe flights. Routine flights. Boring flights. The kind of flights that pilots pray for. The kind of flights where nothing goes wrong. The kind of flights where 13-year-old girls don't have to save the day. But if they do, they'll be ready. Because somewhere, a grandmother is teaching. Sharing stories. Preparing the next generation. Teaching them that knowledge is survival. That fear is information, not a prison. That courage is acting anyway. That legends don't just fly. They teach. They inspire. They save lives. Even when they can't speak. Even when they're unconscious. Because they've already taught someone who can speak for them. Someone who will carry their voice. Someone who will echo their wisdom when the world needs it most. Angel and Echo. A legacy that will never die.